Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca, your narrator. Today, I want to share a story about a challenge that's been a big part of my life. Like many of you, I've had my share of struggles, especially with my mother-in-law, Emma. She's the kind of person who has to be in control, constantly pushing past the boundaries my husband, Anthony, and I set. Despite repeatedly warning her, we weren't always great at enforcing those limits, which allowed her to influence our lives far more than we ever intended. It's not that she's outright rude or that she dislikes me, but she certainly found ways to make it clear that she wasn't fond of me. Her criticism was subtle but frequent, often about my style, and surprisingly, about Anthony's too. There's a long list of things she did without our permission, but perhaps the most shocking was our wedding. Emma took it upon herself to change everything from the decorations and flowers to the cake. We managed to stop her from altering the venue, but for everything else, we had to either accept her choices or lose money. When we confronted her, she always claimed that she knew best and had better taste than we did. Despite her high standards, her respect for our decisions was minimal, which left us feeling insulted and frustrated. Anthony, unfortunately, struggled to stand up to his mother. The idea of cutting contact was never on his mind, so I did my best to simply ignore her interference. Things stayed relatively calm for a while, until Emma found a new way to assert her influence. After years of saving, Anthony and I were finally able to buy our dream home. It was perfect for us, and I took great care in decorating it to reflect our tastes. But when Emma saw it for the first time, her reaction was far from positive. She criticized everything, from the furniture to the color scheme, calling it cheap and tasteless. She insisted we should have consulted her before making any decisions, but we stood our ground. We made it clear that the house was ours, and we were happy with how we had set it up. Despite our firm stance, Emma continued to offer to fix our home to her liking. But we refused, reminding her that it was our space, not hers, and we intended to keep it that way. I share this story not just to vent but to connect with those who might be dealing with similar challenges. It's a reminder that while we can't always control other people's actions, we can choose how we respond and stand firm in what matters to us. I wasn't a fan of how Emma insisted on changing everything in our home according to her preferences. This time, though, Anthony and I were determined not to let her meddle. Despite her persistent texts, calls, and unexpected visits, we stayed firm. But Emma didn't give up easily. She had a more subtle plan to celebrate the purchase of our new home. After years of saving, Anthony and I decided to take a short vacation out of state. We hadn't had a getaway in years, and with some extra money, it seemed like the perfect opportunity. We arranged for a neighbor, a kind gentleman in his 70s, to watch our house while we were away. He promised to let us know if anything unusual happened, though we didn't expect trouble. Imagine our surprise when he called, saying he had seen 4 women entering our home. We were confused, and when he described one of them, we realized it was Emma. In a mix of disbelief and frustration, we needed to know what was going on, so I called Emma directly. "Emma, what are you doing at our house? Our neighbor saw you and some people entering." "Oh, I'm staying here for 2 weeks with some friends, just 4 of us. No wild parties, don't worry. We thought it would be nice to spend some time together. Plus, your house could use some looking after. Consider it a little house-sitting favor. But we're not even home. Why would you bring your friends over?" I asked, perplexed. "Don't worry, I'll keep them entertained. With all the recent break-ins around your neighborhood, it seemed like a good idea to make sure your place stays secure. You wouldn't want anything to go missing, right?" Emma explained. While Emma's reasoning seemed to make sense at first, her actions were entirely uninvited and intrusive. This was yet another instance of her overstepping boundaries, this time using concern for our security as an excuse. Her casual tone only heightened my unease. It was clear that she had used her key to enter our home without asking, and I began to wonder how far her meddling had gone. I was grateful to our neighbor for keeping an eye on things, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I shared my concerns with Anthony, who took it more in stride, focusing on the potential security benefits. But for me, this felt like a blatant violation of our privacy. Emma had a long history of pushing boundaries, and this was yet another example. Anthony promised that we would address it once we got home. He admitted that he had to stop avoiding conflict with his mother, especially now that her actions were becoming more extreme. I understood that it was hard for him to confront her, given their history, but I still felt uneasy and wasn't fully reassured by his resolve. The next day, our neighbor's call only added to my growing anxiety. He asked if we were still away and, after confirming Emma's presence at the house, reported hearing strange noises coming from inside. They didn't sound like normal household activity, but more like renovation work. This threw us into a state of panic. We had no idea what Emma might have been doing in our absence, and the situation suddenly seemed far worse than we initially thought. The neighbor's description of the noises and the arrival of interior decoration deliveries made it clear what was happening. Emma, who had previously criticized my home decor, had taken matters into her own hands. One of her friends was a professional interior decorator, which confirmed our worst suspicions. The realization that Emma had decided to overhaul our home without our permission was devastating. Anthony and I were both in shock, struggling to process the extent of her actions. We thanked our neighbor for his vigilance and made it clear that Emma's interference was unauthorized. We couldn't wait any longer, our vacation was over. The weight of this betrayal was too much, and we were determined to stop Emma before she could do any more damage. I debated whether to involve the authorities. The idea of calling the police on Emma was deeply upsetting to Anthony. But as much as it pained us both, the severity of the situation made it clear that we needed to act. With Anthony's reluctant agreement, I made the difficult decision to request a welfare check from the police, citing the disturbing reports from our neighbor about ongoing disruptions at our home. It felt like the only option left to protect our house from further unauthorized changes. When I contacted the police, I left out my suspicions, simply mentioning that Emma and some of her friends were staying at our home. Given the recent increase in burglaries in the area, the police took my concerns seriously and agreed to conduct a welfare check. The officers' feedback was nothing short of shocking. They reported that our home was in disarray, with ongoing demolition that left dust and damage in its wake. My carefully chosen decorations were either destroyed or missing, a clear indication of the complete disregard for our belongings. When we returned home, the reality was even worse than we had feared. The images the officers shared confirmed the extent of the destruction. Overcome with emotion, I broke down, devastated by what I was seeing. Anthony, though visibly enraged, kept his composure long enough to confront the situation directly with the police. He made it clear that Emma had overstepped, carrying out renovations without our permission and causing considerable damage. The officers were sympathetic, acknowledging the financial and emotional toll this had taken on us. Faced with the choice of pressing charges for property destruction, Anthony and I agreed that Emma needed to be held accountable. The police offered to initiate the legal process on our behalf and promised to provide additional documentation of the damage. In the meantime, we arranged for my sister to keep an eye on the house until we returned. Though I was overwhelmed with anger and frustration, Anthony took charge, making sure his mother faced consequences for her reckless actions. He arranged our return flights, determined to address the aftermath of Emma's intrusion as quickly as possible. Once home, we went straight to the police station to take formal action. We provided the officers with photographs of our home before Emma's meddling, alongside images of the destruction she had caused. The officers were visibly appalled by the extent of the damage, and they encouraged us to pursue legal action. My anger and frustration reached a boiling point. I was resolute in ensuring Emma would face the consequences for what she had done. We made the decision to confront Emma directly at the police station. When we arrived, she greeted us with feigned innocence, pretending to be unaware of why she was being detained. Her lack of remorse, coupled with her continued insistence that she was just trying to help, only fueled our fury. Anthony, equally frustrated, confronted her, calling out her audacity in total disregard for our wishes and property. Emma tried to justify her actions, claiming she was just improving our home, completely oblivious to the chaos she had caused. She even offered to fix everything if she was released, not realizing the gravity of her situation. But our resolve was firm. We told her she would never be allowed near our home again, and we were pressing charges for property destruction. It was only then that Emma seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. She broke down in tears, trying to shift the blame onto me, claiming that I was the one who wanted to punish her. Her attempts to manipulate Anthony fell flat. We were united in our decision, and we were determined to make her face the consequences of her actions. The moment Emma realized her actions had led to real legal consequences marked a turning point. Anthony, standing by my side, said firmly, "Mom, Rebecca's right. You've ignored our boundaries too many times. This is the final straw." Despite Emma's protests and emotional pleas, Anthony stood his ground, emphasizing the need for restitution to cover the damage she had caused. Her tears and pleas for mercy were met with cold indifference. We had seen this manipulation before, and we weren't swayed by it. Her so-called good intentions were irrelevant. The damage to our home, and to our trust, was irreversible. We left her at the police station, determined to rebuild our lives and home. But Emma wasn't finished. She was released on bail and showed up uninvited at our house. This only reinforced our decision. Anthony once again made it clear that no further contact would be tolerated. Emma's desperate attempts to regain our favor only confirmed that cutting ties with her was the right choice. We needed to protect our peace, our home, and our future. As the months passed, the absence of Emma's judgmental presence brought us a newfound sense of peace. We started to embrace a more carefree and positive outlook, free from her interference. This ordeal led us to seriously consider maintaining this distance permanently, hopeful for a future where we could enjoy our lives without her disruptions. We continued to seek support as we navigated this difficult journey, believing that this decision was the key to the fulfilling, drama-free life we had always wanted. Music.